If you don't know who Vladimir Klitschko is, please allow the great man himself to explain.
Please excuse me, maybe sound a little arrogant, but for example, parallel, Mount Everest, the tallest mount, the highest mount in the world. It's there. Has been there for a long time, it's gonna be there for a long time.
The self-proclaimed Mount Everest of boxing, he holds the record for the longest cumulative heavyweight title reign and the second longest single reign. He has the second most heavyweight title defenses behind only Joe Louis, and he has the most heavyweight title fights with 29. He was a beast who'd obliterated all comers with a right hand that worked more like a steel hammer. No one had come close to beating him in years. He hadn't been beaten in 11, and he'd unified 3 of the 4 alpha belts. So when an undefeated 27-year-old loudmouth named Tyson Fury, who had once given himself an accidental uppercut in a fight, was rumored to be Klitschko's next opponent, no one gave him a chance. No one except Fury. He was pretty confident.
1,000,000%, infinity%, as much as you can ever dream of. I'm confident of winning. If it does happen, he'd get knocked out around about 7-8 rounds after being involved in a bit of a brawl. If he's made fight Vladimir, he's old, he gets tired fast, and I'll knock him out for sure.
Fury got the fight, and Klitschko seemed uncharacteristically smug about his chances.
First time I heard this like running joke. I'm like, did you see this guy? He was punching himself in the face. I'm like, shut up. Impossible. How you can fight and punch yourself in the face?
That was all Fury needed, and all of a sudden, the big guy was on a mission.
I'm interested in all the titles, all them belts you've got on there. I'm interested in breaking your face in. That's what I'm interested in, yeah? You're boring. I want to rid you out of the heavyweight division. Your jab and grab style, surely all of Europe wants to see you get beaten. And all of Europe and the rest of the world will see you get beaten. You have about as much charisma as my underpants. 0. None.
The fight happened, and Fury did the impossible. It was ugly, it was slow, it was a snooze fest. But he outboxed Klitschko for 12 rounds to take all the belts he could carry. And somewhat surprisingly, he did it with class.
I'm a young, big, fast heavyweight, so congratulations to Vlad because he landed some great punches on me tonight. But tonight just wasn't his night, and it was my night. And if I could just say one thing, if I could be half as good as champion as Vladimir Klitschko, I'd be very, very happy.
When Conor McGregor beat Eddie Alvarez to become the first dual-division title holder, or champ in UFC history, he kicked off a trend that swept through the UFC like a daycare cold. The bug bit women's bantamweight champion Amanda Nunes, who started talking about moving up to claim the featherweight title held by Chris Cyborg. But as the saying doesn't quite go, few things could be said to be certain except taxes, death, and Chris Cyborg destroying her opponents. Since losing her very first professional fight to a knee bar, the Curitiban force of nature had been starching women for 12 straight years. In her 5 UFC fights, she'd been an average 16-1 favorite and had 5 wins. Consensus was that Amanda Nunes was good, but not great. She may have beaten Miesha Tate and the ghost of Ronda Rousey, but she'd struggled in her other 2 defenses. She was hardly the all-conquering champion that the division had become accustomed to. Plus, she was coming up 10 pounds to face the scariest female striker in history, who was so big she famously struggled with weight cuts. People were expecting a stand-up slugfest, and they got what they were expecting, as both women started throwing early and often. People were not expecting Nunes to rock Cyborg 30 seconds in and then drop her 4 times to take the victory in under a minute. It wasn't just that Nunes won, but that she'd put the scariest woman in MMA face down on the canvas in only 50 seconds. Amanda Nunes walked out of the cage only the 3rd champ in history, and the new, undisputed baddest woman on the planet. In 2015, Ireland's notorious Conor McGregor looked unstoppable. In 6 fights with the UFC, he'd finished 5 opponents, won 5 performance bonuses, and claimed the interim featherweight title by knocking out the 2-time contender Chad Mendes. The only man left in the division was the undisputed champ Jose Aldo, the best featherweight there had ever been. And within 13 seconds, McGregor had knocked him clean unconscious. But that's not the upset we're here for. McGregor then booked a fight with the lightweight champ Rafael dos Anjos, intent on becoming the UFC's first dual division title holder. But just 11 days out from the historic encounter, RDA was forced out with a broken foot, and the UFC was left desperately seeking a last-minute replacement. The man they got was the 19-10, 10th-ranked lightweight Nate Diaz, who, as legend has it, was cruising on a yacht drinking tequila when he got the call. That didn't mean he wasn't going to put on a fight.
Nate, there's a lot of tension going on here. Give us your thoughts on this fight.
Hey, I'm here to kill or be killed.
Understandably, he wasn't going to make the lightweight limit, so instead, the featherweight champ McGregor agreed to fighting at welterweight.
168. First of all, give us your thoughts about having a last-minute opponent, being able to fight at 170, and Nate Diaz.
It's another day for me. One pulls out, another one steps in. I'm used to it. I was just giggling at his little soft body. I've never seen a skinny guy. How can a fat guy be so skinny at the same time? It amuses me, but...
It was supposed to be a walk in the park for McGregor, and for the first round, that's what it looked like. But in the second, Diaz came on hard and rocked the champ, forcing McGregor to shoot on the jiu-jitsu black belt. For that, he paid. And the super late call-up without a hope handed the Irishman his first ever loss in the UFC.
You know, hats off to Nate. He fought very well. He stayed in there. I fight a man in the division I am champion in, and they crumble under those shots. But Nate took them very well. The weight, I think, allowed him to take those shots well. So
it was a monumental loss for the up-and-coming megastar, and it was one Diaz didn't let him forget in the rematch.
It's a little silly, man. Got pictures of me up in his garage with him punch me in the face. Like, what the f? Who does that? He's trying to hype his own self up, but when he goes to sleep at night, he remembers what happened the last time.
There may never have been a man who looks more like a champion heavyweight boxer than Anthony Joshua. His anatomical perfection looks like it was designed by a Renaissance sculptor for decorating museums, rather than laying out opponents. But lay out opponents he did, flattening champs, ex-champs, challengers, and chumps alike on his way to becoming the undefeated unified heavyweight champion with 22 wins and 21 knockouts. He'd just show up to work, drop a body, and follow it up with a polite conversation with the press.
You get to a stage where it seems like it's a pantomime, that you go in there and you beat someone, and it's scripted. Boxing, sometimes it's easy.
AJ seemed to be sticking to the script when he booked a fight with Jarrell Miller for his American debut. But in an unforeseen plot twist, Miller took all of the drugs and tested positive to 3 different performance enhancers. He was replaced a month out by the 6'2", Snickers-loving Mexican Andy Ruiz Jr., who wasted no time reassuring everyone that he was ready to stick to the script.
I think it came in a perfect timing to fight against Anthony Joshua. And those belts look really shiny, really good, man.
Ruiz was a 15-1 underdog coming into the fight. Just another flabby punching bag for the mighty god of boxing to dispatch. And when Joshua knocked Ruiz down in the 3rd round for the first time in his career, the only person surprised was Ruiz himself.
Man, that's crazy that happened, right? Man, that was my first time in the canvas. And when I was in the canvas, I was like, whoa, what the hell just happened? But I had to get him back, you know? I had to get him back.
Suddenly, it was the challenger's turn to surprise. Ruiz beat the count and seconds later stunned the champ with a left hook. He dropped AJ again before the end of the round, and then twice more in the 7th to end proceedings.
You know what? Everyone's been doubting me since the beginning, you know, especially from this fight. Nobody wanted to know that I was going to win. Nobody did. And everybody that betted on me is gonna make some serious money. But you know what? I thank God to this moment, dude. To this moment, and I'm here now. You know, the first Mexican heavyweight champion of the world.
The tradition of champion boxers hand-picking easy opponents has been around for a long time, and the tradition of those opponents overcoming long odds to take an upset victory has existed nearly as long. In 1935, Max Baer was riding a huge wave of success all the way to the heavyweight title. As part of a 14-fight win streak, he'd bested the former champion Max Schmeling by TKO. Before dropping Italian Adonis Primo Carnera 11 times to claim the belt. Keen to make the most of his new title, Baer picked out former title challenger James Braddock as his first defense. After a promising start to his career that included an unsuccessful shot at the title, Braddock had fallen hard, dropping from 36-6 to 49-25. Things got so bad during the Great Depression that he'd had to quit boxing altogether, trying to make ends meet as a longshoreman. But a few wins in a row had made Braddock just enough of a contender for Baer to pick without absolute ridicule. All the same, Baer made his lack of concern for the result clear.
Lying lazily on the beach beside his brother, there makes sandcastles. What's the idea, Max?
This is my wrist, you know, my hand.
Strengthens your wrist.
Braddock came in as the 10-1 underdog, but managed to immediately capitalize on the champion's overconfidence, taking a lead in the early rounds and holding his advantage to the end and ending Baer's reign in only his first defense. Leading Grantland Rice to right of Baer's title reign, the primrose path is pleasant while it lasts, but the end is quick and sure. At 5 is possibly the most famous fight in boxing history. George Foreman versus Muhammad Ali and Zaire in 1973. The fight named by promoter Don King as the Rumble in the Jungle. In contrast to the modern idea of Ali as the all-conquering champion, the Muhammad Ali of 1973 was looking eminently beatable. The quicksilver perfection of his first championship run had been ended first by the American government, and then by Joe Frazier, who had dealt Ali the first defeat of his career in his first championship bout after being suspended for defying the Vietnam draft. A second loss to Ken Norton had left Ali looking human for the first time in his career. He was 32 years old, slowing down, and the shine was all but gone. George Foreman, on the other hand, was the stuff of nightmares. At 25, Big George had beaten all 40 men he'd faced and knocked out all but 3. He'd won the belt from the first man to beat Ali, Joe Frazier, by stopping him in the second after 6 knockdowns. Saying George was confident coming into the fight was an understatement. The guy was the greatest show on earth, Foreman would say of Ali later, and I figured I'd knock him out in 3 rounds. The bell rang, and George pinned Ali against the ropes and threw everything he had at the older man. Little did he know that Ali had been practicing for just such an occasion, learning how to let an aggressive fighter tire himself out with wild swings, while Ali used the ropes to relax in what would come to be known as the rope-a-dope strategy. In the 8th round, Ali pounced, dropping the now exhausted Foreman to win back his belts in the most watched boxing match in history.
I think that saying he had a hard chin, you could say that, but he was something greater than a chin. Something greater than a chin. He had a wheel like I've never seen in the ring ever. I've never seen again.
2015 was a simpler time. Donald Trump was still known as a reality TV star. No one had ever heard the term Brexit, and Ronda Rousey was the most dominant fighter on the planet. How dominant? She was 12-0 for starters. Fresh off her 11th first-round stoppage, a savage knockout of Betch Kahia in front of Kahia's home crowd. She had just been voted Fighter of the Year at the ESPYs, labeled the world's most dominant athlete by Sports Illustrated, and had inspired serious articles questioning whether she could beat Floyd Mayweather in a fight. And she'd cleaned out her division in a total fight time of 24 minutes 30. Holly Holm was also undefeated in the cage, but in her 2 outings for the UFC, she had managed only 2 decision victories, and one of them a split against middling opponents. Holm had proven she could fight in a boxing ring, having won belts from the WBA, WBC, and various other minor titles. But she was still fairly fresh to MMA, and the consensus was that she was about to be chewed up and spat out. Instead, in front of the biggest live gate in UFC history, Holly Holm fought the perfect tactical fight, staying mobile and picking the champ off at range. A clean head kick in the second sealed the victory, bringing Ronda Rousey the woman and Ronda Rousey the myth back to earth with a resounding thud. Rousey would only fight in the UFC once more, and Holly Holm would go on to lose her belt the very next fight, and nothing was ever as simple again. Back when Muhammad Ali was still known as Cassius Clay, the heavyweight champion of the world was a monster.
Sonny Liston was Godzilla. He was unbeatable. He was going to reign for 1,000 years.
Liston wasn't just the baddest man on the planet. He was generally thought of as a bad man. He was the product of a poor, violent upbringing and reportedly worked for the mob. He may have only measured just over 6 foot, but he had an 84-inch reach, an inch longer than the 6'7" Deontay Wilder. And Liston used that reach to lay opponents out. He was coming into his defense against Clay, having just handed former heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson back-to-back first-round knockouts. The last time he had lost, Cassius Clay had been 12 years old. And the man who would become Muhammad Ali had yet to make his name. He was only 22, and in only his 20th fight, looked like he was being rushed too far, too fast.
Cassius Clay was a good, talented young fighter, but most members of the sporting media didn't give him a chance. I believe out of 41 reporters at ringside for that fight, and in those days you had far fewer reporters at ringside, only 3 picked Cassius Clay to win.
The expectations were that it would be a massacre.
These were my instructions. As soon as I got to Miami, rent a car, drive back and forth between the arena where the fight was going to be held and the nearest hospital, so that I wouldn't waste any deadline time following Cassius Clay into intensive care.
But Clay's lack of notoriety turned out to be a blessing. He surprised everyone with his size and speed. His dazzling hands and footwork proved too much for Liston, who retired in the 6th round, leaving Ali to utter his now iconic phrase.
I shook up the world! I shook up the world! I shook up the world!
Afterwards, Ali made it clear who he blamed for Liston's embarrassing loss.
All of you reporters made it hard on this one. Never write about me like it. Never make me 6 to 1. Just make me angry. Never make me no underdog. And never talk about who's gonna stop me. Well, ain't nobody gonna stop me. Not a heavyweight in the world fast enough to stop me.
There are few things people have been more certain about than Mike Tyson beating James Buster Douglas. Tyson was threat personified. The fact that he was less than 6 foot tall and spoke with a gentle lisp only made the reality of his boxing performances more vicious. He'd knocked out people like Trevor Berbick in round 1, Larry Holmes in the 4th, the undefeated Michael Spinks in the 1st, and Frank Bruno in the 5th. He'd become the youngest heavyweight champion and the youngest undisputed heavyweight champion in history, and no one he beat mattered.
It's great winning. Now it's over with. What's up, Cole? You got it, babe.
James Buster Douglas, on the other hand, was fine. He had a middling 28-4-1 record with a lackluster 18 knockouts and was 6 years older than Tyson. He had a full 12-inch reach advantage, but Tyson had always been the shorter man and never been troubled before. Famously, only one casino, the Mirage, had decided to risk opening a book on the fight and had given the odds of 42-1. But when the bell rang at the Tokyo Dome for the start of the fight, it was clear Tyson's mind was elsewhere. Douglas boxed him up, outlanding the champion by more than 2-1 on his way to a 10th round stoppage. Buster outthrew and outlanded Tyson everywhere, but it was his jab that made the difference, as he used his extra foot of reach to land more than 50% of the 243 he threw. The loss marked the beginning of the end for Iron Mike, whose life and career proceeded to spiral out of control. 2 years later, he would wind up in prison, a cautionary tale about the dangers of certainty. There are many reasons why Sugar Ray Robinson is considered the greatest boxer who ever lived. He was a Picasso with the gloves, painting masterpieces of controlled violence that left hundreds of men beaten. His liquid footwork, blinding hand speed, and savage punching power all combined to create a near-perfect fighting specimen. He was the prototype for the man popularly considered the other greatest fighter of all time, Muhammad Ali.
You tell Joe Sonny Liston that I'm here with Sugar Ray. Joe Woods is fat-footed, and Sonny Liston is fat-footed. Sugar Ray and I are two pretty dancers. We can't be beat.
In 1951, it looked very much like Robinson couldn't be beat. True, he had suffered a single loss 8 years earlier to Jake LaMotta, but by the time he got to the UK, the final stop on an all-conquering European tour, Sugar's record was a credulity-challenging 129-1. Randolph Turpin's record was a respectable 40-2. That would be considered a top-tier record today. But Sugar already had 3 times the amount of wins. In fact, he had more than twice Turpin's wins in knockouts alone. 18,000 spectators showed up to watch what was expected to be another masterclass from the American champion, and were instead shocked to watch the quiet-spoken Turpin boss Sugar around the ring for 15 rounds. "I have no alibis," Robinson said afterwards. "I was beaten by a better man." Turpin would travel to America for the rematch and lose the belt back to Robinson just over 2 months later. But the two men had earned each other's respect.
Now, what do you think of Sugar Robinson as a fighter?
Well, it's as he said, he's great.
He's a good fighter, isn't he?
As a fighter, Mr. Turpin's about one of the best that I've ever met. As a gentleman, he's a wonderful fellow. Those of you who haven't had the pleasure of knowing him, Randy is one of the most regular guys that you ever want to meet.
Thanks for watching. And remember, if you want more fight sports in your life, just hit the subscribe button.